For Admiral Gilreath and also if Colonel Pinchason, you have any thoughts here, how do you go about blowing up the bridge without damaging the container ship? I know you spoke a little bit about the crew, but can you walk us through what we're actually going to see today and what some of the biggest challenges are to reopening that deep draft channel? And just for the governor, I know you talked about the $22 million in aid. Can you speak to what the price tag has been thus far, lost commerce? And also, I know, Senator, you spoke about holding individuals accountable. The company that owns the Dolly has filed to petition essentially to shield them from liability. I'm wondering if anyone here can speak to holding those accountable and if that company should be held liable for any damages. Thank you. Sure, no problem.
I'm sorry, yeah, can you do that one again?
Colonel Pinchason, the first question, how do you go about blowing up the bridge without damaging the container ship Dolly, and can you walk us through what we're going to see today?
So don't take this as an insult. When you say blowing up the bridge, that in of itself is a misconception. I know the term might have been used, explosive cutting. We're calling it precision cutting to help set expectations. It's not what you envision in Hollywood, a big fireball. When we say precision cutting, it is exactly that. These are very small linear charges that are placed into cuts that were made, as the governor showed, and it is going to allow for the pressure from those cuts to literally separate the metal and cut through the steel. It's going to be more like puffs of smoke that you might have seen with the Harry Nice Bridge, and the design this plan was designed by engineers to achieve these cuts simultaneously, all at the same time. It's actually the safest and most efficient way to achieve this number of cuts and then have that wreckage fall out and away from the vessel. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
And Admiral, if you can just add some of the largest barriers ahead to actually clearing that deep channel.
I can.
Or if you want to speak to it, Colonel.
So once the wreckage falls into the channel, we will have the vessel refloated, and then you're talking about the wreckage that stays behind. So our salvors are already have the equipment pre-positioned and rigged, ready to come in and remove wreckage, just as we have over the last 7 weeks. They're going to have to either lift it with the grabber, or they'll be removing it after cutting it down some more. But we're continuing the salvage operations in that same methodical and disciplined, safe way that we've been removing wreckage all along. Except this time, the Dolly will be at berth safely and out of the way.
Thanks. And yeah, just to repeat to the governor and others who might want to weigh in on whether or not the company that owns the Dolly should be held liable, and if you have any price tag for the amount in commerce that's been lost so far or the amount to workers that's been lost so far. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I can take the liability question first. I mean, there are current investigations that are going on right now. We've been in close communication with not only our federal investigators, such as the FBI, but also our state's attorney general. We know that those who need to be held responsible for this tragedy will be held responsible. I think the senator pointed out, I mean, the Lloyd's of London indicated this is going to be the most expensive maritime tragedy in our nation's history. And we are very confident that those who need to be held to account will be held to account, and they will be part of this rebuilding process. For the economic impact, I mean, we're talking about a port that has economic output of $191 million daily. This is significant. It's a significant blow not only to Maryland, but also you're talking about the region and the nation when you consider how this serves as a major core artery for 2/3 of the country receives its goods from the Port of Baltimore. And so the reason that we've had that as such a core focus and a core priority, it's both the tens of thousands of workers who are impacted by it, but it is the larger economic hit that this takes towards GDP and the larger supply chain hit that occurred on March 26th. But it is also important to talk about the bridge in that as well, because there are still 3 main connection points that you have to the Port of Baltimore. You have the Harbor Tunnel, you have the Fort McHenry Tunnel, and you have the Key Bridge. Many of the materials that go to the Port of Baltimore, for example, things like hazmat materials, things like our fuel trucks, they are not permitted to go through the tunnels. So the Key Bridge was their core artery. in order to gain access to that. And so when you look at the Key Bridge alone, you're talking about a bridge where about $21 billion of commerce went over that bridge. And so it is significant. And so part of the reason why we talk about you can't just focus on a reopening of the port without also talking about the bridge is because the bridge is a core artery to making sure you have a fully functional and an economically viable Port of Baltimore.
Hi, Governor Scott Broom, WUS. Which is actually the Preston Lane Bridge. To the north of us in Delaware, they have constructed these big bridge protections. What's next in assessing the safety downstream of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge?
Yeah, I can tell you all of our critical infrastructure, to include the Bay Bridge, are all things that we're continuing to look at to make sure that people know that on our roads and our bridges and our tunnels that they can move across safely, that they can move across effectively. This is a process that was taking place even prior to the collapse of the Key Bridge, but making sure we're focusing on critical infrastructure and the protection of our critical infrastructure. It's not just necessary, but frankly, when we think about the importance of it to the state, it's been something that has been long overdue. We can also have critical infrastructure that have single points of failure. So all these are different things that we're looking in, that we're factoring into how we're thinking about budgetary requirements, how we're thinking about asks and supports when we have from both state, local, and federal. But both the Bay Bridge and other forms of critical infrastructure are all things that are very high on our priority list.
And also in partially response to the last question, NTSB is doing an exhaustive study here, and they'll give us a lot of information in regards to what went wrong in regards to the vessel, but also as to the safety features on bridges. And we expect there's going to be standards that will come out of the NTSB investigation that will be used to retrofit current bridges as well as the standard for future bridges. So I think that's going to become a national issue, not just a local issue here.
If I just may add to what Ben said, the distinguished chairman said of the Foreign Affairs Committee, but nonetheless, Senator, what is happening with the bridges is very important, but what is happening with the ships is important too. And as Ben said, they were looking at the ships as well, because you can put the dolphins around the pillars and all of that, but if the ships are better prepared to know when they're going to lose energy, that is a precaution for the bridges as well. And again, as the governor said, this is of national significance. We all are learning from each other on this. And as the governor also said, if you're a restaurateur in Tennessee or you're a car dealer in Ohio, this bridge is important to you in terms of the supply chain. So again, we have, Maryland proud, Baltimore strong, but nationally significant.
Kim Dacey with WBAL. Senator Cardin, you said you were confident that the funding bill would be passed through Congress. What happens if it isn't? Where is the funding going to come from?
There are two questions to that. The funding comes through the Emergency Relief Fund, which is appropriated annually. There's liabilities that they'll have to assume that far exceed the dollars that are in the fund. Congress appropriates money on a regular basis to the Emergency Relief Fund. So we're not too concerned as to the total dollars that we'll be able to get. It should come in the normal course. If the administration seeks supplemental funding for the Emergency Relief Fund, we will certainly be supportive of those efforts to put more money into the account. What we need passed now is the authorization that it will be at 100% rather than 90%. We need that done sooner rather than later because we want to get this bridge moving as quickly as possible. So that's why we're asking to have a procedure so we can get that passed as quickly as possible. We
So
think
the
we
initial
can.
funding would come from that emergency fund you were referencing.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm going to take one last question.
Hey, I had a quick question about vessel traffic. Out of those, I think I heard 365 commercial vessels have passed through in the past couple of weeks. Could we get an idea of what that traffic looked like and what kind of vessels were passing through, and if any of them were some of these vessels that have been stranded in the port? And also just wanted to get a sense of when the crew might be able to leave the dolly.
Good morning. My name is Captain Dave O'Connell. I'm the captain of the port here in Baltimore. So roughly out of those 365 vessels, about 30 of them have been deep draft vessels. So that would be container ships, roll-on, roll-off ships. I would say significantly this morning we moved in 3 ships. So there's a combination container roll-on, roll-off ship that came in this morning. A paper ship came in this morning, and a container ship came in this morning. All the vessels that were stranded in port at the initial on the 26th have all flowed out, with the exception of one that had some mechanical issues that were fixed, and that flowed out this morning. And that was a coal ship, one of the deepest draft ships that we have. That was a draft of 47 feet.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate it. You're done.
Thanks,
So the governor will take questions on other topics. Right here. Right. Yes.
Hey, we're just gonna give a few minutes for everybody to clear out behind. Up to you. I think I got two or three. Yeah. And I got this, so we're still connected to mailboxes and stuff.
Okay, perfect.
Once everybody clears out the back, we'll get going. Movie right here, actually. That way we can go ahead and get started.
Just so we don't have that in the back.
Yeah, we just don't want this in the background. We're at a shot for everybody right here. Sweet. Here you go, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we got time for a couple guys.
Go first.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what are the plans for after the dolly returns to port? And do you know, like, when the crew might, leave and where they would go?
Yeah. So after we have the refloating of the dolly, at that point is when it's going to be returned back to port, and then they'll be able to both get the cargo, get the other remaining containers off of the ship, and then also at that point is when the members of the dolly will have a chance to offboard. And so, again, weather permitting, after we have the precision cutting that'll be taking place today, then that process will begin of the refloating and then the removal of both individual personnel and also the remainder of the container ships off the dolly. I'm not aware of what the crew members are going to do at that point.
Are you endorsing anyone in the Baltimore City Mayor's race?
I'm not. I'm going to, the endorsements that I made for this election are going to be on statewide races. So I've endorsed it inside the Maryland Senate race in the primary. But I know that we are going to be very actively involved and engaged inside of the mayor's race. And while I truly appreciate the partnership and the remarkable working relationship that we have with Mayor Scott, I've decided that I'm only going to endorse in statewide races on that side.
Why is that?
I just made the decision that I think my endorsement and that my voice in that would be most useful inside of statewide races. That we're going to be involved and engaged in races that are taking place up and down the ballot all across the state. But in terms of endorsements, I'm just going to focus on statewide races.
Anybody anything else? Everybody good? All right, thank you guys.
Okay, thanks all.